Hi, friends. Welcome back to True Crime Echoes. I'm so glad you're here with me today. You know, I've always believed that the past leaves little fingerprints on the present, and if we pay close enough attention, we can still see the marks it left behind. Today, we're diving into one of those stories that's easy to overlook because it hides in plain sight. Something you probably see every day, maybe even in your own bag or on your dresser. But behind it lies centuries of history, stories of rebellion, survival, scandal, even danger. It's wild to think that something as ordinary as lipstick has lived through witch hunts, world wars, and revolutions. So, sit back, relax, and let's go on this journey together. Because what seems like just another beauty product is actually a window into human history, dark, fascinating, and a little bit magical. Chapter 1: The Power of a Simple Tube of Lipstick. When I first sat down to research this story, I couldn't help but think about how something as small as a tube of lipstick has managed to cause so much chaos throughout history. It sounds ridiculous at first, right? Lipstick. We see it every day on a store shelf and a purse on a nightstand. It's a routine item. But centuries ago, that same tube of red could mean power, temptation, rebellion, even death. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized makeup has always carried a strange duality. It has been worshipped and condemned. It has been celebrated as a form of art and demonized as a tool of deception. What fascinates me is how quickly it flips back and forth, almost like history can't decide whether makeup is a crown or a curse. Think about it in different eras. A painted face could elevate you to royal status or mark you as a sinner. It could place you at the center of admiration or tie you to witchcraft trials. Even today, we tend to underestimate it, but makeup has always been more than a beauty product. It's a mirror reflecting society's deepest fears, desires, and rules. I find that striking because it reminds me how fragile identity can be. A simple choice, whether or not to color your lips, once held the weight of law, religion, and politics. Imagine living in a world where a little red stain could decide if you were respected or condemned. That's the history we're about to walk through together. In this story, I want to take you with me on a journey across thousands of years, from the deserts of ancient Mesopotamia to the throne rooms of Europe, through wars, revolutions, and shifting ideals. We'll see how makeup became a tool of seduction, a weapon of defiance, a mask of survival, and sometimes a silent killer. For me, it's not just about the powder or the pigment. It's about what those pigments symbolized. They symbolized class, gender, rebellion, control, and at times freedom. And by looking closely at something as ordinary as lipstick, we uncover an extraordinary truth: society has always been terrified of women owning their image. So let's start at the beginning, where history first recorded the act of painting one's lips, not as vanity, but as a declaration of life itself. We're going back to ancient Sumeria, where a queen discovered that a little red on the mouth could spark an entire cultural revolution. Chapter 2: From Queens to Courtesans. When I think about the very first people to paint their faces, my mind immediately goes to ancient Sumeria. This was around 3,500 years before Christ in the region we now know as southern Iraq. Imagine it a thriving city with temples, rituals, and a queen named Puabi who stood at the center of it all. Queen Puabi wasn't just a ruler, she was also a trendsetter. Historians tell us she created her own kind of lip paint by crushing red rocks and mixing them with white lead. Dangerous by today's standards, sure, but back then it was innovation. And she wore it proudly. People looked at her red lips as a sign of vitality, energy, almost like she was embodying fire and blood at the same time. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone wanted to copy her. Men, women, the young, the old, it didn't matter. If the queen wore lip paint, you wanted it too. What strikes me here is how quickly makeup became tied to status. It wasn't just a shade of red anymore. It was a symbol. Having that lip paint meant you were somebody, and if you didn't, you were nobody. It reminds me of how today we chase after luxury brands or limited editions. Back then, instead of a designer bag, it was your lips. From Sumeria, the obsession with beauty traveled to Egypt, and this is where makeup became something even bigger. If you've ever seen images of Cleopatra, you know exactly what I'm talking about: the bangs, the golden headpiece, the striking black eyeliner. Egyptians believed the eyes were sacred, the most important part of the body, almost like a gateway to the soul. That's why men and women both used kohl to draw the eye of Horus around their eyes. To them, it wasn't just about looking good, it was spiritual protection, a way to keep evil away. And here's the fascinating part. Modern science has studied those ancient recipes, and guess what? The ingredients they used might have actually helped prevent infections, even improved eyesight. So yes, it was beauty, but it was also medicine, ritual, and power, all in one. But as history often shows us, not everyone sees beauty the same way. When we move to ancient Greece, the story takes a sharp turn. Their makeup became complicated. On one hand, the Greeks admired pale skin and rosy cheeks. On the other, they looked down on women who painted their lips. They thought it was a trick, a way to deceive men. And here's where the hypocrisy kicks in. Makeup in Greece became closely tied to sex workers. Courtesans wore it openly, using it as part of their trade, while respectable women avoided it at all costs. Laws were even put in place. If a sex worker went out without her makeup, she could be punished for pretending to be a lady. To me, this moment in history says a lot. Already we see how society used makeup to draw a line between women. It wasn't about the product itself, it was about control. Who was allowed to wear it, who wasn't, and what that said about your worth. And isn't that something we still struggle with today? From queens to courtesans, from ritual to rebellion, makeup was already telling us who had power and who didn't. And this was only the beginning. Because as we move forward to Rome, the obsession with beauty reaches a dangerous peak, where the price of glamour could literally be your life. Chapter 3: Rome and the Poisoned Beauty. By the time makeup reached ancient Rome, it was no longer just about ritual or rebellion, it was about excess. The Romans loved to borrow from other cultures, especially the Greeks and Egyptians, and then make everything bigger, flashier, and more indulgent. Makeup was no exception. There are stories about Roman women who had entire teams of enslaved people just to apply their cosmetics. Imagine having someone on call 24 hours a day, not for your meals or your clothes, but to keep your eyeliner sharp and your lips perfectly painted. Emperor Nero's wife, for example, was said to have over 100 servants dedicated to her beauty routine. 100. That's not self-care, that's obsession turned into an empire of its own. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. The Romans discovered a pigment called vermilion, a brilliant red color made from cinnabar, a volcanic mineral. To the eye, it was stunning, a bold, fiery red that signaled wealth and power. But there was one small problem. Cinnabar contains mercury, and mercury is poison. Of course, the Romans didn't know this at the time. They thought they had unlocked the secret to the perfect lip color when in reality they were smearing toxins directly onto their skin. Over time, mercury poisoning would cause tremors, organ failure, memory loss, even death. And yet they kept using it. To them, a beautiful red lip was worth the price. I try to imagine what it must have been like, Roman elites walking through marble halls with their lips gleaming, completely unaware that every smile was slowly killing them. And they weren't just using vermilion. Some lip colors were mixed with fucus, a plant extract that also contained mercury. Layer after layer, year after year, these people were poisoning themselves in the name of beauty. There's something haunting about that image. Because it's not so different from today, is it? We like to believe we're smarter now that our products are safe, regulated, tested. But every few years we hear about a beauty trend gone wrong. Products with dangerous chemicals, skin lighteners with toxic ingredients, treatments that cause permanent damage. History repeats itself, just with new packaging. Eventually, of course, the Roman Empire collapsed. Their trade routes became unsafe, and the luxury of imported ingredients dried up. But the damage had already been done. Makeup had gone from sacred ritual to deadly fashion statement. It was no longer about protecting the soul or signaling health. It was about showing the world you had enough money and power to risk your life for beauty. And when Rome fell, the world entered a new age. The Middle Ages brought war, religion, and fear, and with them came a new enemy for makeup. Not poison this time, but the church. Chapter 4: The Middle Ages and the Demonization of Makeup. When Rome fell, the world didn't just lose its armies and its emperors. It lost its trade routes, its luxuries, and all those exotic ingredients that once fueled beauty rituals. Makeup in many places disappeared almost overnight. But the story didn't end there. Because when one power collapses, another always rises, and in Europe, that new power was the church. Christianity spread rapidly across the continent, and with it came a new set of rules: purity, chastity, modesty. These weren't just ideals, they were expectations. And anything that seemed to challenge God's natural design of the human body, that was dangerous. Makeup fell right into that category. Merchants still tried to sell it. They traveled from the Middle East into Europe, offering powders and pigments at markets, whispering promises that these little jars held magic. Some even claimed makeup could make you live longer, ward off sickness, keep death at bay. And people believed it. The wealthy hired alchemists, part scientists, part magicians, to mix custom lip colors while chanting incantations. To them, applying lipstick wasn't just cosmetic, it was ritual, a spell painted directly onto the skin. But the church saw it differently. To them, this wasn't glamour or healing, it was witchcraft. Leaders declared that women who painted their faces were incarnations of Satan. Just imagine that. Something as simple as rosy cheeks or red lips was enough to brand you as the devil's accomplice. And people were terrified. Propaganda spread like wildfire. Paintings depicted demons putting on lipstick to disguise themselves as women. Priests warned congregations that makeup was a direct insult to God, as if by changing your appearance you were questioning his craftsmanship. It wasn't just frowned upon, it was a sin. And here's where it gets even darker. Women, of course, were the ones who bore the brunt of this fear. If you were caught with painted lips, you weren't just called vain, you could be accused of witchcraft. And in the Middle Ages, that accusation wasn't something you walked away from. It could mean humiliation, punishment, or even death. I can't help but think about the weight of that. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, wanting to feel just a little more beautiful, and knowing that a dab of color might cost you your life. That's how dangerous lipstick became, not because of its ingredients this time, but because of the power it seemed to give women. Still, there were those who defied the rules. Royals and elites, the very people who made the laws, often ignored them. They painted their faces in secret, proving once again that beauty has always been tied to privilege. If you were poor, makeup made you a witch. If you were rich, it made you untouchable. So by the end of the Middle Ages, makeup was no longer just decoration. It was a battleground between faith and fashion, between control and self-expression. And as history moved forward, one queen in particular would push this battle to its extreme, using makeup not just as a mask, but as a weapon to hide her own scars. And her name was Elizabeth. Chapter 5: Queen Elizabeth I and the Deadly Mask of Beauty. When I think about the most iconic figures in the history of makeup, Queen Elizabeth I is always at the top of the list. She's remembered as the Virgin Queen, the powerful ruler who never married, who led England through its golden age. But beneath the crown and the portraits, her story is also one of insecurity, obsession, and a dangerous relationship with beauty. Elizabeth came to the throne in 1559, and from the very beginning, she understood the importance of image. Her elaborate gowns, her jewelry, her carefully crafted public appearances, they weren't just fashion statements, they were tools of power. And at the heart of her image was her face. Pale, flawless, almost angelic. To her subjects, her skin symbolized purity and divine authority. But in 1562, everything changed. Elizabeth fell ill with smallpox. She survived, but the disease left her with scars and pockmarks across her face. And for a woman whose entire reputation was tied to her beauty, this was devastating. She couldn't allow the public to see her weakness. She couldn't let anyone doubt her perfection, so she turned to makeup not as decoration, but as a mask. She began using something called Venetian ceruse, a thick white paste made of white lead and vinegar. She spread it across her face and neck until her skin looked smooth and bright again. On top of that, she added vermilion to her lips, the same toxic red pigment the Romans once used. It gave her back her iconic look, the face that people expected of their queen. But behind that mask, a tragedy was unfolding. Lead poisoning causes headaches, stomach pain, memory loss, even paralysis. Mercury found in her lipstick and cleansers damages the nervous system. Elizabeth didn't know it at the time, but every layer she applied was slowly killing her. And she didn't stop at one layer. She would leave her makeup on for days, even weeks, caking new layers over old ones, hiding the bleeding and peeling that the poison itself was causing. Historians say that by the end of her life, her lipstick was half an inch thick. Imagine that half an inch of red, covering sores, covering pain, covering everything she didn't want the world to see. To me, this is one of the saddest ironies in history. Elizabeth's makeup gave her power, it preserved her image. It allowed her to project strength at a time when women were constantly doubted. But that same mask became her downfall. The very thing that kept her throne may also have hastened her death. Elizabeth died in 1603, and to this day, her exact cause of death is uncertain. But many believe her devotion to makeup played a role. When I picture her final days, I can't help but see not just a queen, but a woman trapped in a vicious cycle, too proud to show her scars, too afraid to let the world see her real face. And it makes me wonder how much of history has been shaped by appearances. How many rulers, celebrities, or even ordinary people have destroyed themselves in the pursuit of perfection. For Elizabeth, makeup wasn't just a habit. It was her shield, her identity, her prison. And when she was gone, the legacy she left behind was a reminder that beauty in the wrong hands can be deadly. But the story doesn't stop here. Because after Elizabeth's death, makeup became more dangerous than ever. Not because of the ingredients, but because of the laws. The church and the courts turned beauty into a crime, and women could literally be punished as witches for painting their faces. Chapter 6: The Laws, the Witches, and the Forbidden Face. After Queen Elizabeth's death in 1603, England was left with a strange legacy. On one hand, people remembered her striking white face and crimson lips as a symbol of royal authority. On the other hand, her obsession with makeup and the way it destroyed her health left many questioning whether beauty could ever truly be trusted. The church wasted no time stepping in. Religious leaders declared that makeup was not only vanity, but a mortal sin. Women who painted their faces were accused of defying God, of trying to alter his design. Sermons warned that lipstick was the devil's tool, a disguise used by demons to lure men into sin. And these weren't just words. Laws began to reflect this hysteria. In England, for example, it was said that if a woman used makeup to seduce a man into marriage, she could be tried for witchcraft. Think about that. A man could wake up one morning, decide he was unhappy in his marriage, and claim that his wife had tricked him with painted lips. Suddenly, she wasn't just a wife, she was a witch. I can't imagine the fear women must have lived with during that time. Something as ordinary as a red lip could become evidence in court. Something as simple as a powdered cheek could be used against you to strip away your reputation, your safety, even your life. And yet the hypocrisy was everywhere. Wealthy women continued to use makeup, often in secret. Royals and nobles could bend the rules because power has always provided a kind of immunity. For the poor, makeup meant danger. For the rich, it was still a luxury. Once again, beauty became a way to separate the powerful from the powerless. What strikes me here is how makeup kept flipping roles. In Sumeria, it was vitality. In Egypt, protection. In Greece, shame. In Rome, poison. In Elizabeth's England, it was both crown and curse. And now, in the years after her death, it became a legal weapon, something men and the church could use to control women. But as history moved on, the world began to change again. Trade routes reopened, science advanced, and eventually a new kind of revolution arrived. It wasn't just political or industrial, it was social. And at the heart of it were women who refused to stay silent. These women would take lipstick, once condemned as a sin, and turn it into a symbol of freedom. Chapter 7: The Industrial Age and the Red Lip of Rebellion. By the 1800s, the world was changing faster than ever before. Factories rose, machines took over, and for the first time in history, makeup wasn't just a luxury for the elite. It could be mass-produced. That changed everything. Suddenly, powders, creams, and lip colors were no longer secrets passed through trade routes or made by alchemists in dark chambers. They were products sold openly, advertised, marketed. Beauty had become a business. and business was booming. Women everywhere were buying makeup, even as society still looked down on it. It's a strange contradiction. On the surface, people wanted women to appear modest, natural, untouched. But behind closed doors, women wanted the choice to control how they looked, and they were willing to pay for it. That tension between what was expected and what women desired set the stage for one of the most powerful movements in modern history. In the early 1900s, women in the United States and Britain were fighting for the right to vote. The suffrage movement was fierce, demanding equality in a world where women couldn't even own property in their own name, let alone have a political voice. These women marched, protested, went on hunger strikes. They chained themselves to railings and smashed windows. They were willing to risk everything. And right in the middle of it all came lipstick. The suffragettes began wearing red lipstick during protests. To them, it wasn't vanity, it was rebellion. A slash of red across the mouth was bold, confrontational, impossible to ignore. It said, "I am here, I will not be silenced, and I am not ashamed of my presence." In a world that wanted women to disappear into the background, red lips became their battle paint. I find this part of the story incredible because it flips the narrative completely. For centuries, lipstick was used as a weapon against women to mark them as sinners, witches, or seductresses. But in the suffrage movement, women reclaimed it. They said, if you're going to call us bold, we'll be bold. If you're going to call us dangerous, we'll wear the color that makes us look dangerous. Red lipstick became a symbol of resistance. And it worked. By the 1920s, lipstick was no longer just a statement for activists. It was everywhere. Flapper women in smoky jazz clubs wore it with pride, pairing it with short haircuts and fringe dresses. To them, it wasn't about appealing to men, it was about shocking them. It was about owning their choices, their voices, and their bodies. Of course, not everyone approved. Older generations saw lipstick as a sign of moral decline. But to the young women of the 1920s, that was exactly the point. Every swipe of red was a challenge to tradition, a reminder that women were stepping into a new role in society. It's fascinating to me how something so small could hold so much power. A tube of lipstick wasn't just makeup anymore, it was politics, it was protest, it was progress. And as the years rolled on, lipstick would continue to show up in the most unexpected places, even on the front lines of war. Because in the 1940s, as the world plunged into chaos, once again, lipstick would become more than rebellion. It would become a weapon of morale and even an act of defiance against one of history's darkest figures. Chapter 8: World War II and the Lipstick of Defiance. By the 1940s, the entire world was at war. Factories were converted into weapons plants, men went off to fight, and women filled the jobs they left behind. It was a time of rationing, sacrifice, and survival. But even in the middle of this chaos, something as small as lipstick managed to take on a role that was anything but ordinary. Here's the twist: Adolf Hitler hated lipstick. He believed the ideal woman should look pure and natural, without bold cosmetics, especially not red lips. To him, red lipstick was vulgar, a symbol of excess, something that didn't fit into his rigid vision of the Aryan ideal. And so women all over the Allied world did the exact opposite. They wore red lipstick proudly. It wasn't just about looking good, it was an act of rebellion, a way to say, you can't control me, you can't silence me, and you can't erase my femininity. In a strange way, painting their lips red became a political statement, a small but powerful act of defiance against fascism. In the United States, the government even got involved. They realized that makeup, especially lipstick, boosted morale. If women working in factories felt put together and proud, it lifted spirits. If soldiers saw their sweethearts and wives with bright red smiles in letters and photographs, it gave them hope. Makeup became a weapon not of destruction, but of resilience. The famous cosmetic brand Elizabeth Arden even created a special shade called Victory Red. It was made specifically for women serving in the military, matching their uniforms, and symbolizing their contribution to the war effort. In fact, red lipstick became mandatory for women in the U.S. Army. Think about that: at a time when food, gasoline, and even clothing were rationed, the government made sure that lipstick was not only available but encouraged. And when I picture those women factory workers in bandanas, nurses on the battlefield, even soldiers themselves, I imagine how something as simple as red lips could mean so much. It wasn't vanity, it was unity, it was courage. It was saying, we are here, we are strong, and we are not afraid to be seen. Of course, once the war ended, the meaning of lipstick shifted again. The 1950s brought prosperity, consumer culture, and a new kind of pressure. Now, makeup wasn't a weapon of defiance, it was an obligation. Women were expected to look polished, perfect, picture-ready at all times. Lipstick, once a symbol of rebellion, became a symbol of conformity. And by the 1970s, that pressure sparked yet another revolution. Because this time it wasn't just about the color on your lips, it was about whether you should wear any makeup at all. Chapter 9: Breaking Barriers. From Feminism to Fashion Fair. The 1970s were a turbulent time. The war was over, but the battles at home were just beginning: civil rights, women's liberation protests against the old order. Society was shifting, and makeup once again found itself caught right in the middle of the storm. On one side, lipstick was still powerful. Women wore bold shades, purples, blacks, shimmering blues as a way to stand out and reject the rigid beauty ideals of the past. Rock stars like David Bowie, Prince, and countless punk icons pushed makeup even further, breaking the gender barrier and showing that beauty wasn't just for women, it was for anyone who wanted to use it. For some, smudged eyeliner and glitter weren't just fashion choices, they were declarations of freedom. But not everyone embraced this colorful rebellion. In the feminist movement, many women began rejecting makeup altogether. They saw it as a tool of oppression, a way to keep women chained to beauty standards created by men. To them, taking off the lipstick wasn't just personal, it was political. It was a statement that a woman's worth should never depend on how she looked. This created a strange divide. Some women used makeup as a weapon of empowerment, others abandoned it to make the same point. And the beauty industry? Well, it adapted quickly. Companies started marketing a so-called natural look, pushing products that promised liberation while quietly reinforcing the same old pressures. But while these debates were happening, another fight was unfolding, one that had been ignored for far too long. For decades, women of color had been left out of the beauty industry entirely. Foundation shades stopped at ivory or beige. Lipsticks were created with only pale skin tones in mind. If you weren't white, makeup wasn't designed for you. That changed when trailblazers stepped in. Decades earlier, Madam C.J. Walker had already built a beauty empire for Black women, becoming the first female self-made millionaire in America. But in the 1970s, Eunice Johnson, co-founder of Ebony magazine, took things even further. One day, while backstage at a fashion show, she noticed something shocking. Models with darker skin were forced to mix random powders and foundations together just to create a shade close to their own complexion. It was frustrating, demeaning, and exhausting. And Eunice thought, why should women have to struggle just to be seen? So she launched Fashion Fair Cosmetics in 1973. It was the first major line designed specifically for Black women, with deeper foundations, richer lipsticks, and products that celebrated darker skin tones instead of ignoring them. Fashion Fair wasn't just makeup, it was representation. It told women of color, you are beautiful, and the world should recognize it. The brand exploded in popularity, landing in department stores across America and donating millions to African American charities and scholarships. For the first time, women who had been excluded could walk into a store and find something made for them. That's powerful. That's history. When I think about this moment, it feels like makeup came full circle. From being used as a weapon against women, to becoming a tool of rebellion, to finally breaking barriers of race and identity, it's more than just color on a face. It's about belonging. And yet, even with all this progress, makeup still had one more twist ahead. Because in the modern age, every time the economy falters, something strange happens. People may give up luxury cars, vacations, or fine dining, but they almost never give up lipstick. Chapter 10: The Lipstick Economy. Why Beauty Survives Every Crisis. One of the strangest things about makeup and lipstick in particular is how it refuses to disappear even in the darkest times. You'd think when the economy collapses, when families are struggling to put food on the table, makeup would be the first thing to go. But history proves the opposite. During the Great Depression in the 1930s, businesses shut down, factories closed, and people lined up for bread. Entire industries crumbled. Yet the cosmetics industry, it grew. While car sales dropped and movie theaters struggled, women kept buying lipstick. Sociologists call this the lipstick effect. The idea is simple when money is tight. People cut back on big luxuries houses, jewelry vacations, but they still allow themselves small indulgences. A single tube of lipstick was affordable even for women who had very little. It gave them a moment of escape, a tiny piece of beauty in a world that felt hopeless. It happened again in the early 2000s. After the attacks of September 11th, lipstick sales went up. In 2008, during the global recession when jobs were disappearing and homes were being lost, the beauty industry thrived. Makeup companies reported record profits, while almost everything else shrank. And it makes sense. Because when the world feels unstable, we cling to things that give us control, however small. Lipstick is something you can hold in your hand. You can apply it in the mirror and see an instant transformation. Maybe your job feels uncertain, maybe the bills are piling up, but for a moment, that red or pink or coral shade can make you feel like yourself again. Strong. Ready. Presentable to the world. It's almost poetic, really. Lipstick isn't about the pigment, it's about the ritual. That act of twisting the tube, smoothing color onto your lips and saying, "This is me, I'm still here, I'm still standing." But of course, as powerful as this small ritual is, makeup has also carried its own flaws. The industry has been guilty of exclusion, of pushing toxic products, of creating impossible beauty standards. And yet, despite all that, lipstick continues to survive every storm. When I think about it, it's almost magical how something so ordinary can hold so much meaning. And that magic, that sense of transformation and confidence, is exactly why makeup hasn't just lasted through centuries, it has thrived. Which brings us to today. Because now in our modern world, makeup isn't just about rebellion, survival, or identity. It has become art. It has become therapy. It has become one of the most personal forms of self-expression we have. Chapter 11. Makeup as Magic and Modern Identity. After traveling through thousands of years of history, I can't help but marvel at how something as small as a painted lip or a sweep of color on the eyes has carried so much meaning. Makeup has been poison, and medicine rebellion, and conformity sin and salvation. It has been outlawed, celebrated, and weaponized, all depending on who was holding the power at the time. But here's what strikes me: most makeup has always been more than just appearance. In ancient Egypt, it was spiritual protection. In Rome, it was social rank. In the suffrage movement, it was rebellion. In World War II, it was defiance. In the Great Depression, it was survival. And today, it's identity. For me, makeup feels like magic, not because it changes who we are, but because it lets us choose how we present ourselves to the world. Some days it's armor, some days it's play. Some days it's simply a way to say, I'm still here, and I deserve to take up space. Of course, the industry still has work to do. Inclusivity is better than it's ever been, but it's not perfect. Beauty standards still push impossible expectations. But what history teaches us is that people, especially women, have always found ways to reclaim makeup, to turn it from a tool of control into a symbol of freedom. And maybe that's the real secret. The power of makeup isn't in the tube or the powder or the pigment. It's in the choice. The choice to wear it or not. The choice to experiment, to blend, to paint, to erase. The choice to use it as art, as therapy, as rebellion, or as nothing at all. When I think about my own relationship with makeup, it isn't about perfection. It's about that quiet moment in the mirror where for a few minutes I'm just creating. It's about the little boost of confidence when I swipe on lipstick before walking out the door. And it's about knowing that no matter what chaos is happening in the world, there's always this small ritual I can come back to. Maybe those alchemists in the Middle Ages were right. Maybe makeup really is magic. Not because it makes us prettier, but because it connects us to history, to culture, to each other, and most importantly, to ourselves. And at the end of the day, that's something worth remembering. Makeup washes off, but the meaning we've given it over centuries, that lingers. And that's the story, my friends. From ancient queens to suffragettes, from soldiers to rock stars, makeup has always been so much more than color on the skin. It's been a mirror of society reflecting our fears, our power struggles, and our desires. If there's one thing I take away from this journey, it's that history always finds its way into the smallest details of our lives. Even a simple tube of lipstick carries echoes of rebellion, identity, and resilience. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow along and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear what surprised you the most. Until next time, take care of yourself, make good choices, and remember, sometimes the darkest stories hide in the most unexpected places.